For those of you who have points. Hey, it's Monday, May 10th. We're almost down. I was just telling these kids we're down like 2.5 weeks. We only have like a handful of class periods left, which for me is sadness because I enjoy teaching and being in a room with kids. But for you guys, you're probably excited to run away. We're going to finish chapters 5 and 6 today. You're going to have to read. My goal is that you're going to read about 10 pages on your own. We're going to try and get through enough of chapter 6 that your homework is reading all of 10 pages. Let's see. So there we had 2 students of the week. One was Mariah. The other was Hadley. Go both of them. Basically, I went off of Friday. It went for any kid that had the quiz turned in by 1 o'clock and got a perfect score and had not gotten in trouble for the week. And so they were the ones I was looking for. And I was specifically trying to find 3rd and 5th period because 3rd and 5th period was behind in my students of the week. And I had 2 kids that did, so they got lucky. I believe as of now, all of my classes are equal in the number of kids I've chosen. So this week it's open like all of my classes. I have no idea who I'm going to end up picking. So we'll see, but go there. This has finally wrapped up and is done. For those of you who follow me on social media, I put you on social media and bragged about you. Your picture was on there and I was talking about how awesome you were and stuff like that. So go you. And I'll be using these pictures next year to taunt kids. Because when we finally get to Greek mythology and start going through, I'm going to bring this slide back up and your smiling face will be up there to taunt them about the fact that you're better than them. So you go you with your specially-ish-nish. Yes, but I'll probably forget who you are. Then those of you who have points, you'll get a chance to spend them here in just a moment for those of you who want to. I will be doing it today, again Wednesday, and then the 2 days next week. After that, is it possible? Yeah, but probably just like before or after class. Because when I start telling my stories, I have to be able to have enough time to tell my stories. And so I'll be jumping into it and doing things a little bit faster. And I may have different things that become available as I run out and have to go buy new things. You should know how many B points you have. If you try to spend points that you don't have, I charge you those points and don't give you the thing. We call that an idiot tax. So if you're currently sitting at 20 points and you go, I want to buy a giant pixie stick, and you raise your hand and make me have to look at the thing, I charge you 5 points and you get nothing. You're like, but that's not fair. I'm like, yes, you just paid a tax for being an idiot. It's easy to not pay that tax. Here's how you don't pay it.
You have a brain.
Yeah, don't be an idiot. Pretty much comes straightforward from there. Do the math. So you cannot go below 25 points, so keep that part in mind. So things that you can purchase, which I'll be giving you guys a chance to do here in just a second. Random Laffy Taffies, just like the little ones you get for Halloween. The baby Skittles, not Skittles made out of babies. It just means like the smaller packages of Skittles. The Starburst, a little twofer thing where it has like the 2 Starbursts that are combined into one. Or chocolate. I do have a handful of Reese's cups I went out and got, but it was not a huge thing of them. I still have the ball thing, the Whoppers. For those of you who like Whoppers, I still have some of those left. You're welcome to also. That's all the chocolate I have for now. I'm going to try and go out and go get more chocolate at some point. I have Blow Pop. I have Dum Dums, like the little Dum Dum suckers. You can get 3 of those. Or the Airhead, just like the normal sized Airheads, the things like that. Or the bag of chips. I literally just went to the store and bought like this giant things, like a variety pack of chips. So it's just got things like Doritos and regular Lay's and stuff like that, and Fritos and random chips. The big fruit snacks, they're the Kellogg's ones. I tried to get like the biggest ones I could get in individual packages, and so they're not like the little. I'll show it to you in a second. And then you also have the pixie stick the size of a baby's leg, if that's the thing that you wanted to go for. You spend the points if you buy a thing. So realize if you're at 35 points and then you buy a random Laffy Taffy, that becomes 35 minus 10, which takes you down to 25. That is how math works. So just for thank you. I did that in my head. I had to keep practicing. So keeping track of how all of that bit things works. So home children and those watching the video, I'm going to pause for a second because I'm going to be selling things that becomes kind of boring. So we'll be back in just a second. Go watch some commercials. Hey, hopefully you enjoyed your commercial break. Welcome back. Got a whole bunch of commercials in during that half a second that you were gone. Let's see. And then there, we've now switched out the books. We've apparently been struggling with how money works for some people. I wish you guys the best of luck in the real world. It's really quite a fun thing. Let's see. Let's go through quiz to help kids who are still struggling with quizzy thing. For those of you who are at home and have not turned in quiz, or for those of you who are watching video, trying to help you out. All right, let's go with. Oh, overall, the grades slipped on this one a bit. Our previous one, was the average grade was like an A. The average grade on this one was like a B minus C plus. It was like right around that 79 to 81 area. Probably because I had a number of kids who did not read chapter 4 and then took the quiz and probably struggled with it. Which happens. And the grammar, I do apologize for putting grammar on there. It was a thing that just inspired me. I was like, let's see how well they do with grammar. And the answer is, you guys struggle with it.
Yeah.
And then he goes, what?
And that is part of the issues they did take away. I mean, we used to be able to teach grammar, and they took grammar out. I was like, you don't have to teach it. Kids are smart. They'll figure it out. Listen, I argued. I said this. I said, no, these kids are idiots. They said, no, they're smart and they'll figure it out. I'm like, have you seen these kids? They're walking the walls. So I was rooting for you guys, calling all kinds of names. No, they were all. You guys are enjoyable. Thank you for calling us an idiot, Mr. Boniak. You're the best. Back to here. I figured you could also Google the answer for some of you, as I told you before, to make things a little bit easier. The biggest issue here was a lot of you guys saw that one and you thought it was the word him, which is a pronoun. Him is a pronoun. His is not a pronoun. His is modifying way, which is a noun. So if it's a thing that modifies a noun, what describes nouns? It's an adjective. It was just going through modifying a noun makes it an adjective. Learning. Two. One of the words in the sentence was an adverb. Your hint being almost every adverb ends with the same two letters. Ly. Adverbs end in ly. Yeah, I have even put duh, and you guys are fun. Three. All right. So, by the way, we struggled enough on those two. I'm absolutely putting more grammar on this week. That's not stopping me. So I just figured I'd give you that heads up in case there'd be some more on there. Hey, those other people said you're smart and you'll figure it out. So anyway, back to the actual story. Why does Mark have to go to the hospital? And we're gonna get to the thing where that one guy who smashed the head bottle. We're gonna talk about Ponyboy and stuff like that. Why does the kid pick the fight with Ponyboy? And we're gonna talk about Angela and her many issues. Why was Charlie upset?
The money.
Yeah. I mean, this was the part we read together at the very beginning of it with the money that he held and stuff. They did. They stole it from the other guy. Mark gets in trouble for trying to see his probation. How is he getting the probation officer? Now, why is he on probation? For stealing cars. So what is the term that would describe irony when you are on probation for stealing cars and then you have to steal a car to get to probation? Now, given Mark was again not trying to be bad, but there was no bus to take him, he had no ride. They go, if you don't get probation, we're going to put you in jail. He was like, you didn't really give me an option. So he tried to choose the best possible car, which is the principal's car. And apparently it worked for a long time, until the principal found out. How long have they been friends? Yeah, essentially they became brothers when they were 9 and 10. By the way, we find out more about Mark's parents shooting each other. We're going to get the actual story behind that. And so we're going to find out what happened. They've been friends. On this one, this was just my whole thinky comparison thing about what both Ponyboy and Mark have in common. Yeah, required you to go all the way back to the Outsiders when Ponyboy was in the whole rumble. He got kicked in the head and got a concussion. And then here, Mark got hit in the head and got a concussion. I was like, oh, boy, it's not the same thing. Why would so in the story, Brian tries to get hired at the bar, and Charlie's like, "No, I'm not going to hire you. You lie all the time." But he also says, "I wouldn't hire Mark either." Why would he not hire Mark?
He was in
He's like, Mark will steal stuff. He's like, I can't have either a liar or a thief. He's like, you spend your time making poor choices. Sometimes you suffer from them. And this was Brian and Mark suffering from being a thief and a liar. Let's see, how do we suspect, speaking of him being a thief, he shows up with a random shirt and he's like, I just found this in the street. So we're guessing that he probably stole it somewhere because Mark's really good at thievery. And see, Brian feels a show. When they're at the dance, all of a sudden he's talking to Cathy. Not Cathy. Yeah, Cathy, not Angela's the scary one. Talking to Cathy, the not scary one. And he ends up getting jealous because she makes the comments of the fact she's like, ooh, Mark, he's kind of a hottie. I can see why girls would like him. He's like, what? You like Mark? And she's like, no, I don't like Mark. I'm saying that he's attractive, but I like you. But he has that moment of jealousy. Because that's the joy of being a girl. And I mean, you could. Part of the problem with guys are not confident in who they are enough to be able to say a thing like that. They're like, all right, I mean, that guy's handsome. I mean, I say them all the time. I'm confident in who I am. And if you attack me, I could care less. Like, I tell my wife that all the time. I see that guy, I'm like, that dude's a hottie. I'm like, I'm not attracted to him, but seriously. You can see it and respect it and not be like, oh, I want to be friends. No, you're just like, that guy's hot. Be confident in who you are. Way back in chapter 2, we're going to talk about this scene in a moment too. With Connie, the girl, and Mike gave her the ride home. He gets put in the hospital. What is she, or how does she thank him, or why does she thank him?
Revenge.
Which we're going to talk about here in a second. That whole scene. I know, I figured the same thing. That's why I want to talk about that scene. That's why I wanted to read with you guys. We just didn't get a chance to get to it. We're going to talk about it today. And I know it was absolutely confusing, which I want to talk about. So overall, as we go through, the hardest one was saw that one coming, did you? By the way, the adverb one, you guys did all right on that one. That one was not nearly as much of a struggle. The first one for his was the toughest one. And then the other two was this one I understand, it was a tough one. And so we're going to talk about it here in a second to try and help you out. And then why pick the Ponyboy fight? Again, it's probably the trying to figure out the whole Angela thing, which I'll talk about. The other ones, you guys did well. Overall, so go ahead. And so you guys are trying to make me like be glad you're gone. It's like I can't. So special. So moving forward, I will be reading chapter 5 with you when we get done talking here in a second. Whatever we don't finish on chapter 6 will become homework for Wednesday, is reading the end of chapter 6. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll be about 10 pages. Again, if you don't want to use your own brain, then you can go and I have the audio books on there. I figure at some point I'll stop letting you guys know that, but half you guys don't pay attention. So back to our novelty thing from there. Ooh, hang on one second. Home children, we're going to pause again with another commercial break. Commercial break. Welcome back from your commercial break. Let's see, we have Matt, we had kids running around. Time's on there. Hey, Graham.
My water bottle.
Sure, why don't you pass? No, he's only 16. I mean,
He's a junior, right?
yeah, he's a junior in high school. It's only 2 years after the Outsiders. In the Outsiders, he's in 9th grade, and this one he's going to be in 11th grade. So he's a junior in high school. Yes, sir. Because they
No. There were 2 7th graders, 3 8th graders, and then the rest were 9th graders.
it's a good challenge for you to overcome.
They couldn't make the basketball.
There's people on the top right of the street. There's a Bella and a Ricky.
So hippie wise, so the main characters we have, Eminem is our hippie. Yes. Randy is also, but he doesn't show up again. He was only in that one scene. The Hippie House does, we'll talk about. And then we have, oh wait, how old is Eminem? 13. So that's going to play a role as we move into the part for today. Remember, Eminem is only 13 years old so far.
I mean, only.
Again, we're not flexing on the 12-year-olds. It's okay. So, it's in comparison to Brian and Mark, because how old are they? So they're 16. They're now old enough to drive. That's why I said he's only 13 and compared to them being 16.
Ponyboy, he's only a year older than them.
He's also 16.
Why would he be 16 and a junior?
Because sometimes you can be 16 and a juniors. That's when you're baseballs. You kind of want to.
What does that mean? They're juniors or they
I think they're juniors
So
also.
with you boys,
Correct. They're all the same. All three of those are the same age. Here we get to see. This is what Eminem's wearing as far as the peace medal and the army jacket. Then we get to who's good at the hot wiring. And so that was Matt. I will try to send this out to you guys to make things a little bit easier as far as like the main characters. I've got a feeling, much like in The Outsiders, you had Dally and Gary who were the two confusing ones. I think the two chicks, Cathy and Angela, will be the tougher ones here. Cathy, Eminem's sister. Angela is Curly's sister. She's the one that's like the good person, and then she's the one that has the bad girl issues. So if we get to it from there. See the hippie bus, that was Randy who showed. Oh, Hippie House. We are going to come back and talk about Hippie House. I'll be using these pictures of you. This comes back, and one of the characters ends up going there. We say we got to the ring. This was the whole idea of Cathy not wearing one because now she's dating Brian. She and Brian are kind of going out. This scene with the whole Mike and Connie thing that I wanted to get a chance to read with you. So this is Mike is the guy that's in the hospital, and we find out that he got beaten up really badly. And so it was his friends were hanging out in I think it was a grocery store, drugstore kind of thing. And Connie shows up, who's an African-American girl, and his friends harass her. And then he gives her a ride home. During this ride home, she starts crying and having issues and worrying about different things. And he's trying to be a nice person to her. Talks about her like digging into a straw purse. That's what straw purse they're referring to. He stops the car to get a handkerchief, and she freaks out, thinking he's going to be awful to her. Throughout that whole thing, does Mike do anything mean to her? No. All right. So, do you think Mike is a good person?
Yeah.
All right. So then we get to her house, and she gets out, and he gets surrounded by her brothers or brother's friends, but a whole bunch of these African American guys surround the car, and she's crying, which does not look good. And so they go, "Hey, did this guy do anything to you? Do you want us to do anything to him?" And did he do anything to her? No. So what does she have them do? Beat him up to the point where they put him into the hospital. And the question comes up, why would she do such a thing? Which is a solid question. Realize this was written like 40 years ago where this was an issue. Problem is, it's still relevant today because this very much connects to the BLM movement. It connects the idea of racism. With her, she has nothing against Mike, but she wants to get revenge. Who does she want to get revenge on?
White people.
Exactly. And so it's because and they do, especially here, she has been stepped on and smashed all this time up till now. And all of a sudden, she has a chance to get revenge. Her one chance in her life to get back at this group of people. Problem is, Connie knows Mike's a good person, which is why she starts crying. She's crying there at the end because she knows the choice she's getting ready to make. It is not a good choice. She's like, "You're a good guy, and I'm getting ready to have my brothers stomp you into the ground because of who you represent." She gets the chance to get revenge on a group of people that she hates. Even if he's not necessarily a bad person himself, he does come from that particular group. Just like in like World War II, you don't have to know every Nazi if you wanted to go kill a Nazi. It's why they put them into video games. It's just, this is a group of people that you want to get revenge against. He represents that group of people. So then the question becomes, is Connie a bad person? And so that's where it gets a little bit tougher and it goes back and forth with what she did. It's easy to hate her. Does Mike hate her?
No.
And that becomes a big part of it is, can you forgive somebody something like this? Do you have somebody that you hate, a group of people or a
Yes.
person who has made you feel bad? And if you get that chance to get revenge, do you? If you would, you cannot be mad at Connie. If you just nodded your head like, oh yeah, they would, then why are you mad at something she would do? Is that not the same thing you would do? Now, with Mike, he can forgive. He's like, you know what? I understand. I've got people I hate. For him, it's like teachers. If I had the chance to get back at teachers, hands down, I would absolutely stomp on a teacher. He's like, even if it wasn't necessarily the teacher that did a thing to me, the chance of getting revenge when I never get that chance, I'd absolutely go for it. So he is forgiving. Mark and Brian talk. Brian, main character, he's the same way. He's like, yeah, I can understand forgiving somebody. Mark does not. Mark is the kind of person who will never forgive you. If you hurt Mark, he will kill you. Simple as that. There is no going back. Now I say that, and remember, has anyone hurt Mark recently? Who hurt Mark recently? But that guy was an idiot. And so here's our issue. Mark has just told us, I don't forgive people. You do a thing to me, I come back to you and I'm gonna put you in the ground. We just found out someone did something to him. And he's not going to get revenge on that guy because that guy, as we found out, the part was just an idiot. They're like, you're an idiot. And he's like, oh, I'm an idiot. And they find out that apparently Angela is the one that's responsible. So here's where we're going to get to it. Now, the problem is, can he just go punch Angela?
Yes.
No.
She's a girl. So he can't just go beat her up because even Mark, that's too much. So what he can do, though, is be very creative and very awful. So what he's going to do is be creative and be awful. Now you're making it easy. We get to the school dance, and that's where we find out with the whole, we meet Ponyboy for the first time, who shows up here. And this is where Ponyboy is 16, and apparently he's also a fairly good-looking kid and stuff like that. And they do like a little talky thing. Ooh, Brian does not like Ponyboy. And that was the question. Did you catch why he does not like him?
Because he's not Angela asking to go for Ponyboy.
And so Angela, his ex-girlfriend, has been trying to go out with Ponyboy. Will Ponyboy go out with her? No. Ponyboy has nothing to do with her. Turns out Ponyboy just is completely oblivious. He's like, why would I go out with her? She's like a horrible person. And so, but that makes Brian feel even worse. He's like, what? My ex-girlfriend's a horrible person? She is a horrible person, but only I can call her a horrible person. And so he gets mad at Ponyboy for the fact that Ponyboy is smarter than he is. Because Brian realizes Angela is a horrible person, but he wasn't smart to figure it out. Ponyboy figures it out right away. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere near that crazy hose beast. And so he tries to keep distance. Which, by the way, speaking of her being a crazy hose beast, she's mad at Ponyboy for turning her down when she asked him out. She's like, hey, you and I should go out. And he's like, no. So that's why she has a guy try to beat up Ponyboy. So she sends a boy to go beat him up. He's like, what? Well, backing up. Let's say I ask out a girl and she was like, no. And I'm like, oh, I know how to make you like me. I'm going to have this guy come hit you with a bottle. And so that's going to make you like me. And you're like, that doesn't work for any human. Yeah. Angela's crazy. So that's why she sends somebody to go beat up Ponyboy, and the guy gets into a fight, and then all of a sudden he picks up a bottle to smash Ponyboy. Mark steps in the middle, he's like, whoa, 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 fight fair. And the guy's like, roar, smack, and then hits Mark in the head with the bottle. The friendships are now changing. We get the name of the book on page 68. They're like sitting there talking about the fact that things have changed in their friendships. One of the conversations we're going to have moving forward into the end of the year is how often your friend group changes from junior high to high school. Very seldom do kids who hang out together in junior high also still hang out together when they get to high school. It does happen on occasion. For those of you who have older siblings, it's conversations you can have with them. But typically the group of kids that you hang out with are not the same that you get when you're in high school. And a lot of that is you change. A lot of you will figure out because of home life situations. Some of you guys are going to go down the path of poor choices or drugs. Others of you are going to go down the path of things that you find interesting at school. And your friend groups that you've had since elementary school just change and you grow apart from people. It's perfectly normal and part of life. But here, that's what they were talking about. They had like this big scene where Mark and Brian are like, hey, life is changing. He's like, what's going on? He's like, we used to be best friends. He's like, yeah. And he uses the phrase, that was then, this is now. And he was like, well, yeah, but you grow and things change. Like that was then, this is now. And now we're no longer the same people we used to be, which became part of it. Owen? Hmm? Both. I've seen, in the conversations I have with kids, because usually whenever a high school kid comes back to me, one of the first questions I'll ask them is like, are you still hanging out with the same kids that I knew you with? Like in here, I try to pay attention to the kids you talk to and hang out with in my class in the hallways. They're like, are you still hanging out with them? And most often the answer is no, that they've gone other directions. Either kids, some of you guys met new friends this year. Others of you, your friends have gone back to fifth, sixth, and for some of you guys back to elementary. But both of those groups change. Either kids you met this year or kids that go back to elementary. And I don't mean to say like a depressing thing. It's just this, you're going to change. And some of those friend groups do change. Not always. Some of you have friends that you will stay friends with all the way through college. And it does happen. I have kids who come back to me in college. They're like, remember that kid I hung out with in seventh grade, got in trouble? I'm like, yeah, like we're still best friends. I have kids who now have kids of their own who are now in elementary school who still talk to me, and they're still friends with the same kid from seventh grade in my third period who also have kids, and now their kids play together. So it's not every kid, it's just be prepared. Sometimes you're going to go in different directions. That's part of the stories I tell you guys at the end of the year. Is one of them is the stories of me and my friendships and how that sort of impacted me as my friends went different directions also. Did you guys know what the draft was?
Yeah.
Because they talk about it in there with Charlie and he gets a draft notice. This was right before the Vietnam War. And if you weren't aware, the Vietnam War went to go fight against the Vietnamese. Part of that was a lot of people here didn't want to fight in the war because we thought the war was stupid. And so typically in a war, they take volunteers. We ran out of volunteers and we ran out of people who wanted to go fight. So the government forced you to go fight. And what would happen is if you were 18 and you graduated high school and you were not going to college, they would send you to go fight in this war. And they would just randomly choose people. And they would use like your student ID. They go, look at the last number of your student ID, the one that you use to type in. Like, does it end in a 2? If yours ends in a 2, congratulations, you have to go fight in this war. Now, given before you get too excited, they just rotated numbers. And then the next year, they're like, does yours end in a 3? This is your year. And you're like, what? So they just rotate through. If you didn't want to fight in the war, you had 2 choices. Option 1, you could choose to go to jail and you could stay in prison until the war ended. The problem is, you don't know when the war is going to end. It could be next year. It could be 10 years from now. So a lot of people did not choose that one. The other option was leaving the United States and never coming back. And you could just literally run away. That was it. If you stayed here, you were forced to go over and fight. They gave you a gun and they had people shooting at you. And they're like, good luck. And that was the whole draft. Plus, people did not want to go and people were angry with you if you did go. So that's when Charlie gets notified. Charlie did not go to college. He just owns this bar. So he gets a draft notice saying, hey, guess what? You're over 18. Your ID ends in a 2. You're going to war. And that's when he gets really mad and upset talking to Mark and Brian. He's like, I don't want to go fight in a war. I've got a bar. Government does not care. They send you no matter what. Yes. The draft dodgers, what they call back then. I mean, this is before my time, but it was the same thing. And sometimes you could have your parents pay. If you were rich, just like nowadays, you could get out of things. And so there's a lot of people who are the draft dodgers, and you'd have your parents pay a doctor to come up with an excuse for you. But if you weren't one of the rich people, then that wasn't an option. Owen.
Hey, Mr. Broviak.
It's only
Is that Justin Bieber right there?
yes, dear. Continue. Hmm? And that'd be the thing, like you could stay here, but you were a wanted criminal. Like if you chose not to leave, to go leave the country and didn't go to prison, you could stay here, but they would put your name, like as soon as you got picked up by the police, you would then go to jail. And you were basically considered a draft dodger. And you would just be staying here, but like the same thing, you couldn't get a job because as soon as they ran your ID, you would pop up as like a wanted felon. And so yeah, that was absolutely the thing I guess you could do is just stay here, just hide from people. Now, again, everything about it was just awful. We covered this one already. Mark, probation, how he gets there and stuff. Ooh. Does Mark get in trouble for anything he does?
Why did you not probation?
So he did get, but for stealing the principal's car? Do any of you guys, hypothetically, if you have a friend, some of you have a friend who never seems to get in trouble with adults, who is like, or you guys know that one kid here at school, and you're like, that kid's awful, but apparently all the teachers love him and they get out of trouble all the time. That's how Mark is. He's that kid that just never seems to get in trouble. Does the bad things, everyone around him gets in trouble, but Mark always seems to come out of it without getting in trouble at all. That's just sort of like the kid that Mark is. So he is used to not getting in trouble. He did get caught, did go to probation, but that's like one of the only times. Everything else, he is free and clear and not in trouble. Now, I get to finally read to you. Ooh, you guys know what brass knuckles are?
Yeah.
That's going to show up here in a moment. First, talk about that. Now I have another pause. I have to talk about them. I'm going to read first, and then we're going to pause. All right, so page 76. And again, you guys are now halfway down the book. There we go. The first time Mom knew anything about Mark being hurt was when we visited her in the hospital and she saw the stitches in his head. They were real noticeable against his gold hair. She just said, "How bad happened?" Mark answered, "It was a fight," and the subject was dropped. That was a good thing about Mom. She'd cry over a dog with a piece of glass in his paw, but remained unhysterical when we came home clobbered. About fights, she'd say, "Now don't fight at school, you'll get expelled." About drinking, "I'd rather you didn't." So around her, we just didn't. She didn't know about some of the rest of the stuff we did, the pool games, the poker, the gang fights, the dry riverbed parties. But in that respect, she wasn't any different from any other mother. Parents never know what all their kids do. Not in the old days, not now, not tomorrow. It's a long. And realize this was written a long time ago. So you guys are the not tomorrow. And I'm guessing a lot of you guys get away with stuff that your parents don't always know about. I think it probably is. This is part of kid law. Kids get away with stuff. We're not taking volunteers. It's okay. You can go ahead and keep it in your head. The stuff you managed to get away with. The first step of getting away with things is not admitting the stuff you got away with. We stopped in to see that kid, Mike, the one who'd been beaten up so bad. He looked worse than he had before. He said his old man had been in and chewed him out. The doctor had promised him that his father would not be allowed to come to see him anymore. But he was still shook. He looked like a nervous wreck as well as a physical one. "I wish I was dead or somebody else," he said. "You just don't say things like that." It didn't stay long. Things like that depressed me. Mark stayed on to see if he could cheer him up. Mike, I wanted to go to the snack bar and see Cathy anyway. She looked as cute as ever. She said, "Hi, Brian." Not too, sorry, try again. Wrong voice. She said, "Hi, Brian." Not too eager, but friendly enough. I called her a few times in the last couple of weeks and walked to her house to see her, but we hadn't been out. I didn't have a car, and Charlie was still so mad about getting his draft notice. I didn't have the nerve to ask him for his car again. And as a matter of fact, he was in such a rotten mood, I stayed away from his place altogether. I mean, we were friends, and I didn't think he'd ever take his temper out on me. Both big guys, it's safer to be careful. "I'm on my break now," Cathy said, looking at the clock. This was an invitation for me to buy her a soda, so I said obligingly, "You want a Coke?" "I knew you'd say that," Cathy said. She came around to my side of the counter and sat down next to me. never could get over her honesty. Girls are usually girls are usually careful not to let you know what they're thinking. Cathy had never dated before. Maybe that was why she was so open. She didn't tell me about not dating, of course. I found that out from Eminem. I found out a lot of things from Eminem. I've never known anyone so unsuspicious of that little kid. He'd trust Jack the Ripper. He was just a believer. I kept comparing Cathy to Angela. I guess because out of all the girls I've dated, I mean, I started at 13. They were the two I liked best. All right, I don't know if like is the right word for how I felt about Angela. I've been wrapped up in her. I had to see her every day. I had to talk to her 10 times a day on the phone. But now, looking back on it, I don't remember ever liking her. Cathy was smart, but Angela knew more. It was strange. I mean, they both had guts. I can't stand chicken girls. In different ways. Cathy wasn't afraid to say what she thought. Angela wasn't afraid to do what she wanted. Angela wasn't afraid of any boy on earth. Cathy wasn't afraid of any other girl. They were both gutsy, just in different ways. My main problem with Cathy was that she liked me, and I wanted her to be crazy about me. I'm like that. I have a very bad ego hang up. Yeah. Hey, guess who called me? Ponyboy Curtis. He wants to go out Friday night. No kidding, he said, while thinking, I'll murder that guy. What'd you tell him? I said I was busy. Am I? I was stunned again, but didn't show it. Yeah, you are. I'll pick you up at 7. I had no idea what I was going to pick her up in or where we'd go after I did pick her up, but I figured I could work that out later. We're going hustling, I told Mark as we walked home trying to hitch a ride. This time, no friendly hippie showed up to give us a lift. Okay, tonight, for money. We'll need more money to get started with, Mark said, lighting a cigarette. I'll get it. We ran into Eminem at the drugstore. As usual, he was chomping on that crazy candy. At least he wasn't staring into the bag like it contained the eighth wonder of the world. I need some money, I said, deciding not to beat around the bush. You got any? He looked at me with those serious war orphan eyes. I got $5. I raked some leaves to get it. I used to think he and Cathy looked an awful lot alike, but not anymore. I mean, sure, they both had those big charcoal eyes and matching hair, but Cathy laughed more. Her expression usually twinkled with humor. Eminem rarely smiled, and he always looked puzzled, serious, trusting. That's a good deal. Can you loan it to me? Just for tonight. I'll pay you back tomorrow. He pulled out his billfold and took all the money out of it. Be sure not to forget to give it back tomorrow. I need it, okay? Kid, have I ever given you a dirty deal? I said, winking at Mark. No, Eminem said, moved back to his magazine. Never could figure that kid out. I liked him, though. I mean, partly because he's Cathy's brother, partly because he's a good kid, partly because he lived to a nice old age in our neighborhood. Anyway, for a sucker. Mark had given him back his peace symbol. It hung around his neck on the rawhide string, and Eminem kept twisting it absent-mindedly. I wondered if his father still gave him a bad time because of his hair. We decided to hit Charlie's place first. Charlie grinned and waved at us when we came in, so I figured he was over his bad mood about being drafted. Guess what? He said, just like a kid. It was the first time I'd ever seen him act like a kid. They're not going to take me. How come? Mark asked, flopping down the bar. You got like a bad knee from playing football? Charlie shook his head. Nah, it's because of my police record. Wait, you got a record? I didn't know that. What'd you do? Oh, when I was 12 years old, I cut a guy's throat. So you guys in here to play pool? I still don't know if Charlie was telling the truth or just kidding us, sort of telling us that it was none of our business what his police record was for. Either was a possible one. So I don't know if he was lying about that or just a thing that he was just telling the truth about. Charlie's an interesting guy. Yeah, we're here to play pool. Are there any possibilities? Charlie nodded toward the pool room. There's a couple of guys in there. I watched them a little. You can take them. Good enough, I said, sliding off the stool. Hey, wait a minute. Would it do you any good to tell you to be careful? Nope, said Mark bluntly. Charlie kind of laughed and sighed at the same time. Well, I didn't think so. Right, here's the part I have to pause. So the pool playing they're doing what's called hustling, which is different than just playing normal pool. So the normal pool, like when you guys play on when you guys do the game pigeon on the iPad, you guys play the phone back and forth. So if you can imagine, get really good at doing the game pigeon thing to the point where you start trying to bet other people. Like, hey, how about we play for money on that one? But you pretend you're really bad at it so you can get them to bet more and more money. Where you just feel like, I'm not even sure I've ever played this game before. How do you do it? Oh my God, that's awful. Why did I bet you? How much did you win from me? And then like you play it up and it's like an acting thing. You pretend you're really bad. And then you're like, come on, double or nothing. I'll get my money back. And you keep doing it and you sucker the person in. They think you're awful. And then you accidentally start winning and getting better at it. And you're like, oh my God, I have no idea how I won. Oh, there's no way I can win again. Let's double it again. I've got to get my money. And you end up getting better and better. And you take them for a whole bunch of money. Problem is, it really makes people mad because essentially you're lying to them. You're pretending to be really bad to get them to bet a bunch of money when you're good at it, and then you stomp them. And you can hustle anything. Usually it's pool, but it can also be poker. It can also be video games. There's a movie called White Men Can't Jump where they do the same thing with basketball, and the whole idea is of trying to hustle back. So anything you could bet on and be good at, you pretend you're awful to get them to bet a bunch of money, and then you come back. So that's why Charlie's like, hey, can I tell you guys to be careful? Because eventually you're going to make someone mad and they're going to be mean to you. So that's why Charlie's trying to warn them. Speaking of which, we played pool until 12 o'clock that night. The two guys we played against were tough characters, out-of-towners from Texas. At first, we played partners, me and Mark losing by a couple of balls. Then Mark started his routine about wanting to go home. Come on, Brian, you lost all the money you can spare, while I played the eager kid. I know I can win the next game. Then we played singles. I played the better of the two, a weather-beaten guy in his 20s who looked like an ex-con. For all I know, he was. I don't know where else he could have picked up his lingo because he used the worst language I've ever heard, and I've heard plenty. I was careful not to win at first, and then, when I did start winning, I only made it by a few balls, so it looked like an accident. But once I started winning, I didn't quit. By midnight, I had $25.50. Using the conversion we did earlier for $3, that $25 is equivalent to about $350 nowadays. So apparently he took the $5 from M&M and managed to upgrade it to about $350. You're a darn good pool player, Dirty Dave said. He told us that was his name, or words to that effect. His friend, who'd been standing around drinking beer for the last 3 hours, mumbled something about being too good for his own good, but Dirty Dave shut him up. It's closing time, Charlie said. He didn't have any other customers but us by that time. He'd been watching the game the last hour and a half. We're leaving. Mark was sitting on the table of the booth, drinking a beer. I don't know where he got it, and from the surprised look Charlie gave him, Charlie didn't know where he got it either. See you around, kids, the Texan said as they sauntered out. I was busy counting my money, and Mark was stretching his legs. So the hustler strikes again, Charlie said. How much did you get? Enough. Hey, can I borrow your car again sometime? I guess so. Just as long as you buy gas. Hey, come on, beat it. I got some more work to do. Next time you sneak a beer, Golden Boy, you're going to get stomped on. Hey, I didn't sneak nothing. I simply walked over and drew a beer. I can't help it if you didn't see it. I left a quarter on the cash register. You are good at being invisible, man, because anybody gets within 10 feet of that cash register, I know it. You're getting blind in your old age, Mark said, apparently not caring if he got stomped on or not. I gave him a warning look. He obediently shut up. I wasn't taking any chances. We left as soon as we could. We didn't get far. Two dark shapes stepped out of the alley next to Charlie's, and a voice drawled, "Step right into the alley, kiddies." I froze. The voice was Dirty Dave's. I thought about making a run for it, but the voice said, "I got a gun." Well, I decided not to. I still didn't move. Mark suddenly said, "Nah, we don't want to see the alley. We've seen it before." It sounded like he was trying not to laugh. "We're going to give you a lesson on why not to hustle pool. Step into the alley." Now, I glanced at Mark over his shoulder. He shrugged, like he was saying, what else can we do? So we walked past the Texans into the alley. And I was beginning to shake. I was having visions of my thumbs being chopped off, my arms being broken. Things like that happen to hustlers. When we reached the dead end of the alley, we turned and faced the Texans. The one guy was holding a gun on us, while Dirty Dave was putting on some brass knuckles. I could just picture what my face was going to look like when he got through with me. I suddenly remembered Mark, who hadn't done anything but get me started. Hey, come on, man, let Mark go, I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised. I thought I'd be shaking as bad as I was. He didn't do nothing, Mark said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. And Dave said, you better believe it. You were setting him up. When I get through with Hustler here, I'm going to give you a lesson too. Brass knuckles, guns, whatever, Mark said in a voice I could even recognize as Mark's. You'll know you've been in a fight if you tangle with me. I'm real scared, kid. My eyes were used to the dim light by now. I could see past the Texans into the street. I was praying for a police car, something I never thought I'd ever do. Dave took a step toward me. I backed up against the alley wall. I was afraid that if I moved to grab up something to fight with, the other guy would shoot me. Just at that moment, somebody stepped into the other end of the alley, and a voice said, drop the gun and freeze. I got a sawed-off shotgun here, and I hate to scatter dirt over this nice, clean alley. It was Charlie. I never thought I'd be so glad to see anyone. Brian, Mark, come on out there. We couldn't resist smirking a little as we walked past the Texans. You guys know what smirking? It's the smile, you like get all sassy, like if you walk by someone that's smirking. Even in the dark, I could see the anger contorting their faces. It should have warned me, but it didn't. Thanks, Charlie, Mark said as we reached him. You're a real pal. I hope you two learned something from this, Charlie began. But before we knew what was happening, one of the Texans made a dive for the gun and fired at us. Charlie slammed both of us to the ground. But in an instant, Mark freed himself, grabbed up the shotgun Charlie had dropped, and fired back at the Texans who were scrambling over the alley wall. It all happened so quickly that I was trying to figure out what I was doing on the ground with my ears ringing from the blast before I realized what had taken place. Mark was swearing, and in the dim light, he didn't even look like Mark. He looked perfectly capable of murder. His only regret was that he had missed. I did not have any similar regrets. If he had missed, well, so had they. You can't feel too bad when you could have been dead, but aren't. Come on, you can get off me now, Charlie, I said. Charlie didn't move. I pulled out from under him. Hey, man, come on, I said. Then in the white, sickly light from the street lights, I saw there was a neat, perfect hole above Charlie's left eye. He was dead.
That's the chap for the boy.
And that was right after he warned him, too. I wouldn't talk about what had happened to anyone but Cathy and Mark. The next few weeks, it seemed as if I was moving in slow motion while other people were speeded up. Mom came home from the hospital. I flunked chemistry. Angela got married to some creep friend of her brother's. Real quick, how old is Angela? Yeah, 16 also. And so during this time period, she does get married. If you think that's awful, it's even worse than you think. We're going to find out more like in the next chapter that it's even worse than that. I called Cathy every day. Mark was the one who explained everything to the police. The police were very impressed with Charlie's having saved our lives and all that. They were local cops who had known and liked him anyway. They told us we could have his car. I took it because I figured he would have given it to us if he'd had the time. I guess I was acting pretty strange during those weeks because one day Mark said, look it, man, Charlie knew what kind of people came into his bar. Why do you think he kept his shotgun handy? He knew those cowboys had a gun. He knew what kind of a chance he was taking. He told us to be careful. I couldn't get out of my mind. Charlie warning us about hustling. He didn't have to try and get us off the hook. Mark, can't you see? This ain't some story, some TV show. Bang, you're dead, big deal. This is the real thing. Charlie is dead. He was all set for life. He wasn't going to get drafted. He had his business. He was set. We blew it for him. We didn't blow nothing, Brian. Things happen. That's all there is to it. Not things like that. Mark didn't understand. Cathy did. I started spending more and more time with Cathy. Since I had the car, we went for a lot of drives and got a lot of cokes together. We were always talking to each other about the way we felt. I tried telling her how I felt about Charlie, about how shook the whole thing in me. She told me about herself and how she wanted to go to college more than anything, about how she worried about M&M, about life and a big family, something I wasn't familiar with. She was so smart, yet she didn't know a lot of things. She was one of the few really innocent chicks I'd ever run into. I could talk to her about anything, talk to her better than I could anyone, even Mark. After a few weeks, we'd drive by the park and make out for a little while. It was different for me, though, because I quit thinking only about myself, quit pushing for all I could get. Mark was acting strange these days, too. He would stare at me for long periods of time when he thought I wasn't watching, like he was trying to find the old Brian in the stranger, like he was trying to figure out who I was. One night, he even almost lost his temper with me when I told him I was going goofing around Cathy instead of with him. It was as if he felt something slipping and was trying to hang on. I couldn't help him. I was trying to hang on myself. He even acted like he was jealous of Cathy. In all the years I'd known him, in all the years I'd gone with different girls, he never acted like that. I was changing. No, he wasn't. In chapter 6, a couple of things real quick before I run out of time. They're going to start talking about acid in this next chapter. It's the thing that if you paid attention in wellness, it's the hallucinogen, LSD, the thing that makes you see things that aren't there. It was the big thing with the hippies, that and the marijuana. They're going to be talking about this coming up. And also, they're going to talk about cruising, which is where a thing that I used to do back when I was a kid, in the dinosaur times too, where like there's a strip of road and you'd go back and forth and go flirty flirt and stuff like that. So there's usually just a big strip like a city where all the teenagers would hang out and then drive around and flirty flirt with each other. And then they're going to talk about a bench seat. And the bench seat is where you can sit like in the back of most cars. The bench seat instead of like the bucket seat, there's like a long seat like that. They can fit 4 people across. For Wednesday, finish chapter 6. I was hoping to get into it. We did not. But we'll talk about chapter 6 and then begin 7 on that day. That's all I got for you. We be done.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Felicia.